Hello, everyone, and welcome to this very first episode of our new show called Voidcast. I'm your host, Lenny, and with me is your co-host, Carlos.
Hello,
And
everyone.
I think it would make sense to give a very brief introduction of ourselves before we get to the main topic of this episode. So would you like to start, Carlos?
Yeah, sure. So I'm 45 years old. I'm about to be 46 in a few months. I'm Portuguese. I was born in Lisbon. I grew up there for the most part, and then I moved to the UK 17 years ago, where I've been living here among the Brexit madness for all this time. As listeners to this podcast will have guessed by the description, I'm a vegan. I'm also an antinatalist, and I'm also a philosophical pessimist. I'm actually okay with life for the most part. My life at this precise moment is okay. But I would say I'm definitely a pessimist in philosophical and existential terms. And I used to have a podcast which was called Void Wave back in the day, which is how Lenny found me, actually. But that's now defunct. So I'm very excited to be here, kind of speaking to a microphone again, and hopefully getting some engagement from the community and kind of also giving back to the community because I've learned a lot from it and I've made some very good friends. So it's nice to kind of give something back.
All right, great. So I'm Lenny, I'm 26 years old, and I live in the north of Germany. I'm currently wrapping up my master's degree in classical philology, that is ancient literature. And I joined the antinatalist community, if there even is such a thing, if you can call it that, last year. And this was shortly after I became vegan, which was about a year ago or so. So I've been active with a few, more or less antinatalism related projects, but mostly in the background. That is transcribing, translating, editing some obscure books, writing summaries and essays, collecting material, putting together bibliographies, organizing conferences and local meetups and stuff like that. But this show is not about me or what I do. If you're interested, I talk about some of my other projects and how I discovered antinatalism in an interview, which you can find in the description. But anyway, to cut a long story short, I actually found it through literature, first through ancient Greek philosophy and poetry, then through 19th century German pessimism, especially Philipp Meinlander, before I arrived at contemporary antinatalism, starting with Thomas Ligotti's The Conspiracy Against the Human Race, which was recommended to me by Carlos, who I'm now speaking to, on the first episode of the Exploring Antinatalism podcast, which is another podcast. And I've listened to the other episodes of that podcast and was a bit disappointed to find out that we didn't get to hear more of that one Portuguese guy from the first episode. So I was all the more delighted when I discovered his Void Wave podcast, which had a more casual format, which I really like. That is not with the aim of promoting some philosophy or reaching as many people as possible, but literally just two dudes with interesting backgrounds and perspectives sharing their thoughts on various things. And it didn't have this kind of toxic, sometimes problematic stuff that you often find in antinatalist circles. So that was quite refreshing. So I listened to all the episodes. I think there were only 12 in total. It only ran for a few weeks in 2020. And then I decided to message Carlos to see if he was interested in doing something similar again. And yeah, here we are. And I think it's like a great opportunity for me to combine three of my passions, that is discussing and analyzing pieces of media, art, and news, and also like exchanging ideas with like-minded people who are also interested in philosophical pessimism. And I used to do podcasts back in the day, almost a decade ago. So it's great to be on the microphone again. And yeah, a lot has happened since the Void Wave podcast stopped. So I believe there's a lot for us to catch up on.
Yeah, that's right. And besides, you're not the same person as my previous co-host. So
unfortunately, I'm not.
Yeah, no, I mean, you're both German, which is a start, I guess. But everyone has a different approach, and the way also my discussions and what I think is also shaped by the person I'm talking to, like everybody, right? Hearing your introduction, I realized I didn't talk about my vegan credentials, as people like to hear, but I'm not going to go into them anyway, because I think I might mention it during the discussing the article we're going through in this, so
exactly.
I don't want to repeat myself. So I'll probably mention what I actually do as a vegan, besides the things I don't do as a vegan, which is usually being a vegan is defined as by the negatives, right? You don't do this, you don't do that, but I also have like some positive actions. So I'm sure I'll mention them as I go through this article that we're discussing today. The only other thing I would add is that we've got like a full menu of things we want to talk. I think we did a first list of things we wanted to approach in episodes, and that generated about 15 episodes straight away. And that was only like an initial brainstorm. I'm sure as we go through the episodes and we get feedback from listeners, hopefully, and also feedback from ourselves on what we're talking, we'll get to, this list is going to expand quite substantially, which is exciting. The Void Wave was pretty much a lockdown project. People stuck at home, bored, and I guess when lockdown ended, it just became hard to do in a way. But we're not locked down anymore, so I think Voidcast will go far. I mean, at least I want to cover everything on that list we did.
Here's to a good start. So, for the first episode, the one that we are recording right now, we decided on an article, just a small community post by Carnism Debunked, which is a YouTube channel. And for those of you who are not familiar with this channel, this is the channel of George Martin, really cool guy, who's also a vegan and an animal rights activist. And he does a lot of videos. One is called Vegetarianism is the Opposite of Veganism, and this was actually instrumental in my becoming vegan about a year ago. And he's also an antinatalist. He sometimes appears on Lawrence's channel, and he also did an interview on the Exploring Antinatalism channel, but he's not too vocal about his antinatalism on his own YouTube channel. So what's interesting is that, unlike us, I think he is not a leftist. That is, I think he describes himself as more of a centrist or liberal person, and so has a different approach to the topic of veganism, and especially on the topic of intersectionality. So he's quite vocal about his anti-intersectional approach, and also sometimes does videos on identity politics. I'm not sure if he's doing himself a great favor, but anyway, I think it's very interesting that you can also arrive at veganism from a completely different political camp, and maybe reach different people and another audience. So anyway, he did an interesting post, which is entitled "Why Just Being Vegan Isn't Enough." And would you like to read it out, Carlos?
Yeah, sure. I'll just start by saying that what I'm reading, I'm not endorsing. I'm just literally reading off the screen.
We're just here to discuss.
Yeah. Why just being vegan isn't enough. Almost all vegans were raised eating and wearing animals, leading them into an adulthood of funding the abuse and murder of animals once they started earning money themselves. Given this hard truth, vegans must actively undo the amount of oppression and evil they were responsible for by actively speaking out and committing actions on behalf of oppressed non-humans. Simply existing as a vegan who does not buy animal products is not enough, because this does nothing to offset the negative impact our existence had while on this planet. In fact, it actually adds to it, because there is a harm involved in everything we buy. That is to say, a dead non-vegan does more for the animals than a living non-activist vegan, as the non-activist vegan is still causing animal harm just by existing in his harm-guaranteed world. To use the logic of a non-activist vegan, then, who says, I'm doing enough just by being vegan, someone who eats bacon could just say, I'm doing enough because I'll be dead one day and therefore won't be buying animal products ever again. To emphasize just how important it is that we're active as vegans, statistically, a bacon troll who dies at 35 actually has less of a net negative impact than a keep-it-to-myself type of vegan who goes vegan at the age of 48. In order to have a net positive impact on this planet as a vegan, we must undo the harm we've already caused to animals from our pre-vegan days by making an effort to change the world via action. Veganism in itself is a non-action, like being dead and not buying steak as a result of being dead. If we want to offset all the murder and pain we've caused, we have to actively speak out and try to change the injustice. We're all going to die one day. So by being vegan and not doing activism, you're just another dead person to animals. You may not be actively oppressing them anymore, but you are ultimately dead to them, just like every steakhouse owner, every pig farmer, and every bacon troll who pops their clogs. In order to be actively on the animal side, then we have to be activists. Activism takes many forms: street outreach, stickering, supporting activist organizations financially, petitions signing, leafleting, social media posting, classroom talks, and many more things. Not everyone has the time to do all of these things, but please don't do nothing. And that's the article.
Yeah, thank you. So, what do we make of this? I mean, it's a call to action of sorts, and I think it might be worth discussing what he means by being vegan, just being vegan, and doing vegan activism. Like, is there an obligation to do activism for people who call themselves vegan?
I'll start with something just which is my approach. There's so much energy I have in a day, and I will never ever spend energy criticizing other people who are on my side. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So because the energy I could be spending, say, going to talking to this person and telling him why they're wrong on this or that, is energy I could be using for the things I actually care to do, right?
Mm-hmm.
So generally I would never kind of, if I see, like, for example, people doing vegan outreach on the streets, and I think, oh, they're being too harsh, or their language is too cruel to non-vegans, for example, right? I would never interfere, right? Because they're already doing something I think it's positive, and I would never kind of spend energy criticizing them, right? They're on my side, if you know what I mean. So I'll start with that. So I think what we're doing today is just discussing a positive thing, because we're kind of discussing what other vegans can take from this, right? And how they can think about it as well. So I'll just start with that, and then we'll dissect. And I do have a lot of criticism about it, but that's like my little intro.
Yeah, but I think, like, constructive criticism, even if it is directed at your own camp, so to speak, can be very valuable, because if there's no such thing, then things can quickly turn dogmatic, and this can also become a bit of a problem.
Oh yeah. I mean, if you see something very problematic, you should interfere. But I meant, like, in general, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
everybody has got their skills and things they're capable of, and things in their approach. And generally, I try to be more tolerant of those who are in my camp, right?
Yeah, and I think instead of claiming, oh, there's only one approach, like only the utilitarian or only the ontological approach or whatever, I think we should celebrate that there is a certain diversity, and embrace, if not all, then at least many of these.
Yeah.
So,
okay.
Yeah, it would make sense perhaps to say, or to state where we ourselves see ourselves in this veganism, vegan activism field, so that our listeners know who's speaking to them.
Mm-hmm.
So I recently got involved in animal rights activism in a local street team, which I think is for the most part disconnected from my philosophical or antinatalist ideas, but I think it might be a good thing to do in your free time, and this is actually something that is worth fighting for, worth campaigning for.
Mm-hmm.
And I've done a lot of theory in my life, both as a student, but also in my free time, lots of reading books and dealing with theory. But it might also be a good thing to get involved with some practical things and get to know people and their different approaches, instead of just staying in your stereotypical basement or ivory tower, or whatever you want to call it. Might be good to
and of course the practice shapes the theory, right?
Exactly.
And one necessarily needs the other, I think, to perfect each other, right? So you need both, and being trapped inside your head as far as vegan theory goes, can only take you so far, right?
Yeah, exactly. So he, like Carnism Debunked, says that vegans have a duty to engage in some kind of activism, which I think is very broadly defined in this at the end of this post. But he says there's an obligation because veganism itself is a philosophy of non-action, basically. So you have to do something to offset your impact, and I think this is some. This sounds very utilitarian to me, like
Yes.
speaking of net positive and net negative impacts and so on. So this is something we have to acknowledge here.
Yeah,
I'm not a utilitarian myself, but
yeah, I'm not a utilitarian either. Although, if I'm losing a debate, then I'll definitely pull an utilitarian card to try to win it. But that's only out of desperation. But I'm not a utilitarian.
I'm not too dogmatic about my non-consequentialism either.
Yeah.
I do, but sometimes utilitarian arguments make a lot of sense on an intuitive level, and sometimes they don't. And to me, well, it does make sense, but the question is how far can we, or should it reasonably be taken? Many utilitarians are willing to bite a lot of bullets, and
look, he talks about vegans must actively undo the amount of oppression and evil they were responsible for by actively speaking out and committing actions on behalf of. So this is like a utilitarian argument because he's trying to quantify and measure the amount of bad you've done before you became a vegan, so you can pay it back, right? You have a debt from your evil days. This is like a lot of Christianity has similar arguments to this, right? Before you convert to Christianity, you have all this sin before, right? And you need to kind of outdo the sin.
Like go to purgatory to cleanse yourself.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, not all of Christianity thinks like this, by the way. There's different interpretations and sects, but some do. So to me, do you need to? Do you need to? Do you need to do anything?
Well, this just proves that veganism is a cult.
Well, it is a bit. It is a bit, right?
Yeah, sometimes when it gets really dogmatic, there are some cult-like tendencies, but I think this call to action itself, I don't think has any religious.
I mean, you've been a vegan for a year, right?
Yeah, roughly.
Yeah, so I've been a vegan for. It's hard to tell because I became a vegetarian exactly 14 or 13 years ago, and then at some point I became a vegan, but I didn't measure. I didn't set like a date like I did for the vegetarianism. So let's say close to 10 years being a vegan. And one of the things I experience a lot, it's when, like I'm having some food with other people and these people don't really know me very well. So they might not know I'm a vegan. And I might ask the waiter, I never mention I'm a vegan, by the way. I only mention when I have to, because there's already enough stigma of vegans being really annoying and preachy. See, the word preachy is very related to religion. Yeah. Preach. Yeah. So I never mention it, but of course, sometimes I need to mention it, right? I'm at a restaurant and if the menu is not labeled, I need to ask, right? If this has cheese, for example, if it doesn't have cheese, or if it's made this way, that way. And then somebody will spot this and they will say, "Oh, you're a vegan." And I'll say, "Yes." Well, I have no reason to lie. And then what happens is so funny. They'll immediately confess their sins to me, like I'm the priest of veganism, right? And they'll go, "Oh, I rarely eat meat," or
only from my favorite butcher."
Yes, exactly.
Around the corner.
Or, exactly. Or everything is organic, or whatever. I don't know. And it's like I didn't say anything. I'm just existing at that moment. Yeah, I didn't give them a frown, or I didn't condemn them for not being a vegan, but just my presence as a holy man suddenly makes them feel sinful. So I don't think I don't think
they understand that what they're doing is not okay.
Yeah, and I think this happens with a lot of other stuff, right? It's not just veganism; it's kind of any conduct which some people know they're doing wrong, and then others are doing, and then the presence of somebody who's doing it right kind of makes them confess, makes them feel, I don't know, ashamed in some way, right? Or when somebody says, "Oh, do you want to go for for a smoke, and somebody says, no, I don't smoke, I quit 2 years ago, and then the person says, oh, I really should quit, blah blah blah, and I tried quitting 2 years ago, and this and that, and my poor son who has to put up with my smoke, and the person just said, oh, I quit smoking, right? They didn't tell the other person to stop smoking, but it kind of brings everything out. So and that has a lot of similarities with religion, right? Because it's all like a sort of an ethical, a moral codes. Yeah, there's something in there. So anyway, let's try to get out of this second paragraph, please. So utilitarian arguments, yes. I'm not a fan of utilitarian arguments because ultimately you always go, well, if vegans need to undo the amount of oppression and evil they're responsible for, when do they finish paying their bill?
Yeah,
When
exactly.
at what point do they go, okay, I've done enough, and now I'm gonna have some bacon strips, right? Because
But because now my existence is still a net positive, and
Mhm. And now I'm gonna start selling on my shop. I'm gonna start selling bacon again, and then I can sell bacon because every weekend I spend Saturday and Sunday handing out leaflets and showing earthlings to people in the middle of the street.
yeah,
Yeah. Well, no, right?
yeah,
Please don't.
yeah. Nevertheless, I think it is important to recognize that what is it that makes someone a vegan? Is it that they subscribe to the vegan beliefs? Is it that they simply abstain from consuming animal products? What is it? And I recently found a post by Melanie Joy, who's famous for, I think, coining the term carnism. And she actually proposes the concept of vegan ally. That is, you can be part of the vegan movement without being vegan yourself. Like if you just support it and subscribe to the belief, that's great. You're doing great. Keep it up. And
Oh, I don't like that.
yeah, I think this is kind of the opposite of what Carnism Debunked says. Like,
Yeah, I'm an LGBTQ ally because I wasn't born LGBTQ. It's not my choice to make to be LGBTQ, right?
mm,
But I'm an ally because I will fight for their rights and I will challenge bigotry if I'm in the presence of it. But I can't. Everybody can become a vegan. I mean, even because the definition of veganism includes, you know, as far as is possible and practicable,
mhm,
right? So if for some reason you have some sort of medical ailment that absolutely you cannot survive without some kind of animal product or some supplement that includes, I don't know, omega-3 or something, right? And that which must be extracted from fish in this case, cannot be from algae. Um, then you're still a vegan. But to say, oh, I'm a vegan ally out of choice, nah, 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 nah. Sorry.
just to score some lazy moral bonus points.
No,
It
you're not
seems.
an ally, right? You're not an ally because you can become a vegan. It's not like me being an ally for LGBTQ people. I can't become LGBTQ, right? It's something
Mhm.
you are or aren't. It's like essential. So I don't agree. I don't agree with this ally term. Although, by all means, if you want to become an ally, become an ally. If that's going to make my life as a vegan easier, do become an ally.
So yeah, that's um, uh, what he has to say about uh, an obligation for vegans to be active in
Yeah.
in veganism. And how prevalent do you think this is for vegans to engage in some sort of activism?
I mean, I'm very skewed in the vegans I know because most vegans I know are activists.
Mhm. They
Um,
would probably agree with this statement, right?
I would say so. I would say so. I mean, they're quite active. Yeah, people
Mhm.
from Animal Rebellion, and of course, I'm a hunt saboteur. So these people are very full on in terms of their veganism. Right? For them, it's far more than looking at labels in the supermarket. For them,
Yeah.
it's a practice. Right? So
Mm. But honestly, I think depending on how one defines quote unquote activism here, I think it might actually be hard not to engage in any sort of activism unless you are deliberately downplaying your position and actively avoid talking about it. But I think even bringing it up in discussions and arguing in favor of it can be seen as some sort of, maybe not activism in the in the usual sense, but at least some sort of activity in favor of it. And yeah, I think
Yeah, I mean, I'll give you an example of active. I mean, I already said I'm a Hunt Sab, so that's a form of animal rights activism. Protecting wild foxes. Although not every Hunt Sab I've met is a vegan, which is really weird, but it happens. I would say the majority are vegans. But I'll tell you one thing I do as a vegan activist, which is very much non-action. Right. So I'm 45. I'm a male, and I look, in terms of fitness and my age that I appear to be, I look very young and I'm very fit. Fit as in physical fitness, not meaning attractive, as the Brits would say it. Although that's up for discussion, but you're not going to see my face, so you'll just have to imagine. So I would say I'm in the top like 5% of men my age in terms of physical fitness. And I moisturize, I can take care of myself. And the reason I do this, above all other reasons to do this, I mean, people should take care of themselves regardless, right, and being healthy. But the reason I do this is when people talk to me and they discover I'm vegan, that they have a good impression of veganism, for example, right? So they see me working out at the gym or whatever, or running, and I've had people ask me, "Wow, you look, how old are you?" And they're like, "Well, I'm 45," and wow, you look like 10 years younger. And I mean, I'm 45 too. They might say, I'm 45 or in my 40s like you, and I'm really struggling with working out and stuff. What's your secret? And I'll say I'm vegan, right? And this is like a sort of activism in a way, but it's also activism by just existing, right? It's just existing as a healthy vegan, which is to me, it's sort of doing nothing in a way, but it's also important. I mean, it exists. I think it's valid, right? Because I find myself in multiple situations with lots of non-vegans, and if they know I'm vegan, and if I look like a slob, or look unhealthy, or look very old for my age, then that might not be a good advertising for veganism, for example, right?
Yeah, I agree. And I also think that if you subscribe to a certain philosophy, especially if it is an ethical philosophy, then I would say you do have a duty not to be a disgrace, not to do a disservice to that
bad
philosophy.
Example.
Yeah, exactly, a bad example to its public image. And I think that this also applies to, or in a way also applies to antinatalism and representing antinatalism, which we will get to in a bit.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, ultimately, we live in a society. I was going to, well, I won the prize for being the first person to say it, right? We live in a society where appearance is very important, and people pay a lot of attention to individuals and the individual saying the thing, right, rather than the message. I mean, there have been other societies where the written word was the most important, right? And the written word didn't come with a face, didn't come with an appearance, didn't come with gestures, didn't come with a persona. It just came as a kind of a disembodied intellectual message, yeah? But that's not where we are now. Everything comes with an author, and the author is very apparent who they are and what they look like and how they speak. So if you want to promote your message, I think you're doing a disservice to the message if you get angry very quickly, if you look disheveled, or if you don't take care of yourself. I think this is pretty obvious. So when I say my non-action as a vegan is to try to lead, to have good appearance, yeah. But it's in the last paragraph, Carnism Debunked goes into all these forms of activism, and none of them are just be a very happy, or at least outwardly happy looking, successful or healthy person, because veganism also needs it. And I'll give, I want to just say one more thing about this. For example, there's a lot of activity on social media about fat vegans, right? I don't know if you've seen it.
No, I don't think I have.
Like groups on Facebook where vegans who are fat and proud of being fat and they kind of post their giant burgers, which like 4 burger patties with melted cheese and all the stuff, right? And large things with fries, and in a way, what they're showing is, look, you can be fat and love your foods and still be a vegan. And these people are doing it differently than I am, right? They're catering to a different audience than the ones I'm hoping to influence, because I'm hoping to influence people who think of vegans as like, oh, you can't build muscle as a vegan, or your skin is going to look bad if you become a vegan, right? So that's kind of the people I want to influence by existing, and whereas the people who are vegan and fat and who eat all kinds of junk food, they're trying to influence perhaps non-vegans who are fat and eat a lot of junk food, but think they will not be able to do it if they become vegan. So I think they're valid too. I didn't want to exclude
Yeah,
them,
I
which
think
is the
so
reason
too.
I'm mentioning it. Yeah.
And this might also help to get rid of this misconception that veganism is just a diet and people just do it for their own personal health. And if they find it doesn't work out, then they switch back to what they ate
Yeah.
before.
I was a fat vegan, and then I became a slim and healthy vegan. And I was still a vegan, with exactly the
yeah.
same restrictions as before.
Yeah, but I also think like vegans also have a right to be unhealthy.
Yes, of course. Yeah, like
Yeah.
everybody else, right? It's their
Yeah.
body, right? So they're right to make their choices about it. I would say, we can discuss on the subject of antinatalism and everything that comes with that. That perhaps some people have a duty to be healthy, so that
Yeah.
they can live long and take care of what they've created. But that's a different topic.
Yeah, maybe
All
we
right.
should get to that topic now, because
Okay.
regardless of whether or to what extent or under which conditions antinatalism entails veganism or vice versa, like this is a topic for another time. At least we have to acknowledge that antinatalist activism is very much a thing now, with organizations like Stop Having Kids, with people like Lawrence on YouTube. So yeah, antinatalism has now, for better or worse, become a bit of an online identity of its own, which of course does bring a few issues with it, which we can discuss. But during the past couple of years, especially the activist or so-called activist side has grown significantly, and I see antinatalism and its claim to universality as a bit like kind of a spectrum, with the activists like that actively go out and try to spread the word and convert the masses on the one end. And I'm not sure if you're familiar with Andrew McIntosh.
Yeah, he's
Yeah.
my friend.
Okay, cool. Maybe he's listening right now. So greetings. He did a couple of years ago. He did a video on what he calls his miserablist approach to antinatalism. So he talks about his own approach to antinatalism. He says he is an antinatalist because he is a pessimist, and he is a pessimist because, I quote, he is a miserable bastard. And as such, he, of course, holds certain views on the world, certain perspectives, and antinatalism and the antinatalist philosophy, the antinatalist arguments, appeal to him and make sense to him in a way that it wouldn't to like the optimists or to some normies, basically. So he
Mm-hmm.
acknowledges that, and he like makes no pretense of being biased himself. And
Sorry,
even
he makes no pretense of being unbiased. You mean?
no, he acknowledges his own like pessimist biases. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Sorry, I'm not a native speaker.
Yeah.
And
I think you said a double negative, and actually you meant the negative. Yeah.
I apologize. Sorry for
Yeah.
mischaracterizing your position, Andrew. Yeah, and even though the arguments that he finds in the writings of Schopenhauer and Choran and Benatar make sense to him, he says that it's not, that one cannot make a strong enough moral claim based on this foundation. So he is very critical of promoting antinatalism and of like trying to get people to accept antinatalism as the only logical and rational and objective conclusion or solution that there is to the problems of the world. And so he sees this as kind of impractical, which is kind of the opposite of what activists do. And personally, I don't know where exactly I find myself on this spectrum, but I think like all positions are worth considering here. And I mean, I think he literally says that being an antinatalist is one thing, but promoting antinatalism is a completely different thing, because it leads to like this formation of an extra online identity and this club mentality and like dogmatic behavior. And so he would be, I think, strongly opposed to claiming that there is an obligation for someone who holds a position to also promote it.
Yeah, I mean, I tend to agree in general, and I think compared to the formation of vegan activism, which is also a new thing if we think about it, right? Because veganism in itself is a new thing compared to vegetarianism, which has existed for, well, centuries if you want to consider the East, but in the West it's existed for what, 100 years, 150 at most, and veganism is even younger than that. So, but because of the internet, and I think internet facilitates the quick formation of communities based on beliefs and tastes, of course, but beliefs for communities form very quickly due to the internet. Very quickly, veganism has taken this shape of activism, and all this stuff has popped up. Whereas antinatalist activism is still completely in its infancy, it's still trying to find its shape. Yeah, there's of course Stop Having Kids, which is an antinatalist organization, as far as I can tell from their beliefs. And before that, you had
you mean Vehement?
Yes, of course. Yeah, the voluntary human extinction movement, right?
Although it's not,
but they were very small, weren't they? Right, a very small group.
Yes, but they have gained some like notoriety on the internet. But it's important to keep in mind that, strictly speaking, they are not about
That's true.
antinatalism.
So that's true.
They have a different focus, even though their goals align with some antinatalist goals. Yeah, but in general, I think extinction or human extinction is not seen by is not seen as a goal in itself. Usually, just as a hypothetical consequence by people like McIntosh, for example.
As a consequence of the activism itself. But
yeah, exactly. But I mean, as an antinatalist, you cannot be opposed to human extinction. I mean, that would make no sense. That would be inconsistent with the antinatalist position. But you can be neutral or indifferent to the idea of
or see it as a necessary evil, right? You might say, well, it's not something I want to happen, but this course of action will lead to it, and this is the correct course of action, right?
You might even approve of it, but the moment you say, well, extinction has to happen by any means necessary, then you'll find that this position diverges from antinatalism.
Yeah, so look, I feel very uncomfortable doing antinatalist activism.
Have you tried?
I mean, the most I've done is contribute as a volunteer for Population Matters, which is a charity that they do like sex education, distribute and facilitate the use of contraception and family planning and that sort of thing. That's as close as I've got. All my antinatalist activism has been non-action, as Carnism Debunked would say, having a vasectomy, not having children, and encouraging other people not to have children. When people say, I'm thinking of having a child, if somebody asks my opinion, they're going to get it. Yeah. But I don't go out and, engage with fertile people on the streets to try to talk them out of it, because I think I think ultimately it's pointless, but I've got my hands full with the vegan activism, and I've got my hands full with just being a human being who needs things to survive and needs to have a job to provide those things and needs to have time when I'm doing nothing and my brain can relax and my body can relax from all the stuff I set myself out to do, and that fills my time. So I think in terms of antinatalist activism, I mean, this podcast could be considered that. I've certainly organized online communities for antinatalism, which could be seen as activism as well. I guess I've spoken on about it on the internet and with people in real life. I don't feel comfortable. If you look at the list of vegan activism that's on this article, where they talk about uh, street outreach, I don't feel comfortable doing that. Stickering, same, and I think it's not going to do anything. Classroom talks, that will be so awkward. Going to high school and telling teenagers, "Hey, you shouldn't have kids."
You shouldn't have yourself. Please
Yeah,
disappear.
yeah, you shouldn't make more of you. I mean, they're not even probably thinking of that, right? It's too early for them. Leafleting, and what do the leaflets say? Please don't bring a net harm to the world. The world has enough suffering. Don't bring more suffering to it. I mean, I've seen the guy in the UK. What's his name? Danny Shine, right?
Yeah, with the
He
megaphone.
does the thing with the megaphone in London. I mean, I've talked with him personally quite a few times, and now he avoids me.
Oh.
But I've seen him in London quite a few times and talked to him, and I've spoken to him outside the streets as well. And I think he's just doing it for attention. I don't know how much he actually believes in it or not, or what he hopes to achieve by being on the streets and taking like such an extreme philosophical position that needs so much explaining, right? You really do need to explain antinatalism for it to make sense.
Yeah, every single argument, actually.
Yeah. Veganism is very simple, right? Animals don't want to die, and you don't have to kill. You don't need them to die to be a healthy person or whatever. So that's it. It's very simple. Or animal, you don't need to exploit animals to lead a full, successful and satisfactory life. So let's be part of a movement that helps animals not to suffer, and you will lose nothing, right? It's such an easy argument for veganism. Antinatalism, there's no way you can reduce it to slogans. I don't think you can reduce it to slogans. Everything needs explanation, and so that excludes a lot of activism straight out of the way, right? Because you can't put antinatalism on a leaflet, in my opinion. It's not enough. It's not enough. I mean, or rather, the people who will get it from a leaflet are people who would get it anyway, eventually, once they started considering their ethical beliefs and the decision to have or not have children.
Okay, so my own experience has been a bit different. I'm in touch with Karim Akerma. I'm not sure if you've heard of him. He's renowned and prolific writer and thinker and philosopher of the German-speaking antinatalist world. He has written his postdoctoral thesis on the topic and has been writing about it for, I think, close to three decades now. And he actually wrote such a leaflet, which I have a few copies of, and it's a philosophy I find generally interesting. And when I talk to people, I sometimes bring it up. Of course, not all the time. Like, I'm not a missionary of any sort, but it may come in handy, like to have something to give to people. Because if you say, well, it's my position, you can just look it up. Just type antinatalism on Google, and I don't know, the first couple of things you'll find, maybe the Wikipedia article, and then these large groups on Facebook and Reddit and so on, which may or may not give off a good impression.
Or you might get one of the antinatalist preachers who might not be very media savvy. Let's keep it that way. Who might not be very approachable.
Yeah, I think we're thinking of the same figures. And so I think having some sort of good and well-structured and easily digestible introduction to the topic does make sense. And I've seen that it can spark people's interest in the topic. So I don't think that, even though the arguments themselves are quite complex and require a lot of thought and a lot of reflection and dissection. I don't think that this must automatically scare people away. I think we, in spite of this, I think it would make sense to to yeah, to give people a chance to appreciate these arguments and sentiments who may otherwise perhaps not come into contact with it.
Okay, so we're still in the third paragraph, by the way. So maybe let's kind of move on, going through this article. So the next thing I want to pick up is when they talk about, Carnism Debunked talks about, in fact, it actually adds to it because there's harm involved in everything we buy. I think this is a good point. When I meet some holier than thou vegans, I always mention this because, veganism is always imperfect. It's another similarity with Christianity or religions, right? You're never perfect. You're never a saint. You're always going to mess it up. And in this case, as a vegan, you're always going to mess it up. There's always some money you're spending on something which causes harm to animals. And we know that the way our crops are made, right?
Non-vegans love to use this as some sort of gotcha counter-argument to vegans. And if you can't be perfect, don't tell me what to do.
Yeah, and in that sense, vegans themselves should accept that they're not perfect so that this argument can't be used against them, right? So they can say, well, I know I'm not perfect, but I try to be, right?
Mm-hmm. As far as practical and possible.
Yeah. I don't agree with what they say what Carnism says next, where he says, that is to say, a dead non-vegan does more for the animals than a living non-activist vegan. I think this is not true. I mean, obviously, a dead person is not doing anything, but lots of dead people have legacies and things they've created which generate action after their death, right? So how about Colonel Sanders, the man who invented KFC, the recipe and created the chain of restaurants, right? I don't want to say a dead person is doing something morally wrong because they have no way to correct the thing they've done, right? Being dead. But you can leave a legacy of evil.
Yeah, so you must acknowledge that your impact on the world, like if you want to take the utilitarian way, you must acknowledge that your impact may very well extend beyond your mortal life.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you might be an activist vegan and you have 5 kids, and one of that kid becomes an adult who's a very successful meat retailer, right?
I'm not sure if that's a good argument to use. Like, be a good vegan, so raise good vegan kids.
No, but you know what I mean. It's like you will die, and your legacy will be, well, you didn't want this to happen, but it was caused by you and intentionally, right? So, which is why I don't like these arguments. And besides, I don't think we should be compared the actions of dead people with the actions of live people. I hate this argument, absolutely. Mm-hmm. And then he talks about the bacon troll who dies early, and it's like, well, this person has died and they're not harming animals anymore, and so they're offsetting their sin by being dead and doing nothing. Well, I've been dead for billions of years, and then I was born. I was a non-vegan. Then I've been a vegan for a while. I will die, and then it'll be billions of years again. So when we do the utilitarian scales, do we put all my time as a dead person in the being a vegan side of the scales? Because if we do, then I'm amazing, right?
All of us are.
All of us are. Even somebody who kind of hunts animals for sport. It's going to be amazing because they spent 30 years hunting animals for sport and torturing animals, and then there was billions of years they did nothing to harm animals.
Graciously decided not to extend their lifespans by another 100 years. So you should be grateful.
Yeah, that's so strange. That's such a strange argument. Yes.
Interestingly enough, I've heard this very same argument by carnist antinatalists who say, "Well, I'm not having kids, so I'm doing enough. So I'm doing my part. Don't complain."
Well, people say a lot of things, don't they?
Yeah.
So, well, I guess the other thing I wanted to pick up on the article was when they talk about veganism in itself is a non-action, and I've already spoken that I do my vegan activism where I go out in the fields, I chase fox hunters, I try to capture evidence of their law breaking, bring it to authorities, break up hunts. I've had quite a lot of success doing that, which is very satisfactory. Obviously, being a Hansab is not for everybody. It involves being a sort of a type of person who can become a Hansab, because you need to be don't have a lot of fearless in terms of social confrontations with violent people, and you need to be somewhat physically fit and organized.
As you are.
Yeah, so it fits me, right? Whereas, for example, social media posting would not fit me because I would just get bored. My brain would just go, all right, I'm tired of copy pasting stuff and going into online arguments, right? But it might fit somebody else. So activism must always take the shape that's suitable for the person doing it. But so I do that active animal rights activism, and then I'll also do my non-action activism, which is being a good example, I guess. To me, that's a sort of a non-action. But so that's why I don't agree with the call to don't do nothing. And I'm like, okay, just by existing as a healthy vegan, I think I'm doing something. Although, to be fair, that's doing nothing in a way.
But even though this, like simply being a good example, I think this might actually be more effective than some of the things that are listed. Yeah, so I wish he had included that one as well.
Yeah, we for example, I told you here in the UK, maybe in Germany as well. There's the stereotype of the preachy vegan. The vegan.
Yeah, we actually have this. There's a famous, like very very well known and controversial vegan activist called the militant vegan, the militante Veganerin, and she's very popular. I think in part because she embodies this the stereotype of this preachy militant vegan, but people say she's very very effective in what she is doing, and she also appeared on Carnism Debunked channel a while ago.
Yeah, so I'm as I said, I would never stop a vegan from doing their thing. I think those people can reach some audiences, and other vegans who do nothing except be tolerant of non-vegans and be friendly to non-vegans and have a quiet chat if a non-vegan wants to ask questions and they look good, and all those things, and look healthy or satisfied with being a vegan. Those people fit another audience of non-vegans. You know what I mean? And so that's why I would never criticize them for being like that, and why I don't think Carnism Debunked should criticize vegans who do nothing, right? Because the doing nothing is also doing something. It's just in a different way.
Well, it can be. You can do,
or it can be, yes, that's
nothing very well, or you can also do it badly. Like if you don't do anything of the things he listed, and in addition to that, be a bad example of a vegan, then
I think doing nothing as a vegan would be somebody who's a vegan, but then doesn't tell anybody and tries to hide it. And when they go to a restaurant,
I'm keeping it to itself, to myself.
They go to a restaurant with other people and I'll just have some rice and chips, right? So the people, are you vegan? No. I just don't feel like eating anything else today. That to me is like doing nothing as a vegan. But just by existing in the world, I'm not a very social person, but just by existing in the world, I have people ask me about veganism, and they say, "Oh, so what do you eat? What do you do with this, with that?" And I didn't have to do anything. I'm just having a conversation. I'm just answering questions. I'm just being reactive, And I think there's a place for this. There's a place for this. I mean, I was converted to veganism by a person who was literally like this, right? The person who converted me didn't send me a single vegan video. She just existed as a vegan. And then I was a vegetarian and I became curious and I started asking her questions. And like she came to my house. She was my dog walker, actually. And she was at my house one day and I said, well, have a look at my cupboards and what I have in it. What isn't vegan in these cupboards? And she said, well, this isn't vegan. This isn't vegan. And then I said, well, for this, what would you buy? And he said, well, you can buy this from the shop. Oh, how about this? Well, you can easily replace that with this other thing, right? Was she doing vegan activism? Or was she just answering my questions, just being a friendly person, having a normal social interaction? Well, she converted me, right? And then I became an animal rights activist. So yeah.
Nevertheless, I think, with veganism, it is often a bit more clear-cut, like the process of becoming vegan. But with antinatalism, I think it's much harder to identify the stages in which you're in. Some people say they've always been antinatalist, and it's I think it's much harder to identify which were the arguments or the factors or whatever that made you embrace
Yeah.
antinatalism, and how much of this can be attributed to like pure logic and pure reason. So I think that maybe for this reason, vegan activism is going to, like, there's more hope for vegan activism than for antinatalist activism. But nevertheless, I think that antinatalist activism is not off the table, so to speak. It might very well be worth at least like raising awareness for the existence of this philosophy. Yeah.
I think when we get to episode 12 of this podcast, we'll have a better idea of the shape of antinatalist activism. Personally, I'm not sure what I would do for it, but hey, I'm confessing my own flaws in this case and my lack of thought or ideas about it. I mean, I believe in it. I will wholeheartedly believe in it. I've put my body on the line for it by essentially doing surgery to
mutilation.
I mutilated myself for the cause. Right?
See, antinatalism is a cult.
I told you. I mean, I didn't extract my teeth, my canine teeth for veganism, right? So I've done like a bigger commitment to antinatalism than veganism. So I wholeheartedly believe in it. And if somebody asks me, I'm going to have a chat. I can talk to them for hours about that if they want. But if a friend of mine tells me they're going to have a child, I'll just say I won't congratulate them, but I will ask, so when are they going to be born? Have you thought about a name? That's all I will say. And then if they,
I mean, of course, encouraging people to have children would not be consistent with antinatalist philosophy.
No, I would never encourage somebody to have a child.
No, neither would I. But what about this indifference? Like, a vegan would not be indifferent to someone else paying for animal abuse. But
I mean, we are sometimes, right?
Well, yes, but we will definitely raise some objections.
Yeah. I mean, if I'm in a group of 12 people and some of them are ordering non-vegan food, I don't go into a 30-minute rant about what they're doing is evil. I mean, they know where I stand, right?
Some would. And
some would. That's me.
I wouldn't hold it against them. Like, I can understand where they're coming from.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, as an antinatalist, this is, I think, even more impractical and even more unrealistic, like, to imagine such situations. But nevertheless, I think it is, after all, still a moral position. And if you accept this moral position, then you also acknowledge that it's not just a personal thing of you, not a quirk of yours. So it's a moral thing that extends beyond yourself and also applies to other people. You try to live by this principle, but you also recognize that others should do it too. Now, it's a different question how to get others to embrace this holy truth or whatever. But but at least I don't think that. I mean, of course, you can only do so much, and there's only so much that is, strictly speaking, under your control, like in Stoic terms. But nevertheless, I don't think that one should be entirely indifferent to what people do, and if they decide to bring more suffering into the world.
Yeah, I usually insert that when people ask me why I don't have children, and then they get it. Yeah.
Okay.
If they ask me, so how come you don't have any children? How many do I want children? Oh boy, we're gonna have a conversation. But if somebody tells me, oh yeah, my wife got pregnant, or I got pregnant, or my cousin got pregnant, I'm so excited about their baby, I'm not going to go, hey, have you heard about our Lord and Savior, David Benatar?
David Benatar.
I mean, I don't feel comfortable inserting that conversation at that point. But if somebody asks me, I'm going to tell them because they've asked me, right? So I feel comfortable in letting it out. But not in the other situation. Also because life is pretty miserable, which is something you probably agree with me. And if somebody's really happy about expecting a child, I don't want to piss on their parade. They're probably having, the period before the child arrives is probably happier than the period after the child arrives. And I don't want to go, hey, you've done a really bad thing. and now I'm going to make you feel miserable too. There's enough suffering in the world. I mean, the child's going to be born anyway. Maybe later when their child is bullied at school. I mean, I've had conversations with parents like this. Their child goes through some bad thing, like an operation, or bullied at school, or has an accident, or gets to their teenage years and develops an eating disorder, right? I might bring it up. I might say, look, I hate to say it, but you bring a person to this world, you bring this person into harm, into they will have to be lucky, like nobody else in the world has ever been lucky to go through this whole experience without coming across this sort of harm and suffering. And then I might do this conversation, right? Yeah. I mean, this person. I mean, all my children are safe, right? No, none of my children have an eating disorder, or are they bullied at school? Yeah. So I might bring it up then, but I would never, tell like an expectant parent about it.
Yeah,
it's not like I go, oh, you've changed my mind, I'm going to get an abortion now. I mean, come on.
A couple of weeks ago, I visited a friend of mine who recently gave birth to a little boy, and I saw how happy she was with her child, and I on a certain level, like I could understand, I could share her happiness and enthusiasm, but I don't think it would have felt appropriate to say, well, instead you should be miserable. And I mean, it's very unfortunate that it's like a very common occurrence in antinatalist spaces that like miserable people hate on happy people. And this, I think, is a problem, and you can also be happy as an antinatalist.
Yeah, I think I'm a happy antinatalist. I'm pretty satisfied with my life at this precise moment. At was it 4:30 British summertime on the 18th of June 2023? I'm a happy person.
It's on record now.
Yeah, I mean, my qualia are all happy at the moment. But maybe tomorrow at the same time I won't be. But I'm definitely happy at this moment. And I would say in general, I have a good experience of life right now. I've had some terrible experiences of life too. So to me, that argument is just it's like a nothing, right?
So next time someone brings up,
right? Are they?
Next time someone brings up this ad hominem argument, like, oh, you're just miserable bastards or depressed people, I will just redirect them to you, and then
I mean, I can definitely remember very dark times I've had recently, but at this moment I'm not unhappy, because I know that sometimes I'm happy, sometimes I'm not happy, sometimes I'm depressive and go through periods of depression, other times I go through periods of being very joyful, like everybody else, I imagine, unless, I mean, with a normal functioning standard type brain will have. And you can come to antinatalist arguments, you can come to vegan arguments with whatever life experience you come from. We know all those, for example, all those people who were raised to be farmers, like meat farmers or animal dairy farmers, and that's all everybody they respected in their lives told them this was a correct behavior, right? And they still turned out to be vegan and vegan activists as well. So to me, the ad hominem arguments are such silly things, or kind of trying to individualize or personalize or psychoanalyze. I mean, to me, this psychoanalysis in this case is such a individualist kind of bourgeois way of approaching the subject, right? Everybody must have a motivation for something.
It's completely ignoring the systemic issues, the underlying issues.
Yeah. I mean, it doesn't matter. Look, I love meat. I know some vegans who hate meat. They never were comfortable eating meat. I love meat. I haven't eaten meat since 2009, which is a long time ago. I mean, you were still in high school, right? When I stopped eating meat. And if I'm walking in my neighborhood and somebody's doing like a barbecue with grilled meat, the smell hits my nostrils and I feel hungry immediately. I'll feel hungry immediately. But then I don't do anything about it. I mean, I don't eat, right? I don't eat meat. I don't go ask them for a bit of meat. But so what does this mean, right? I mean, does it mean that I didn't become a vegan because I didn't like meat, or some kind of personal thing? Anyway, that's it. Is there anything else you want to talk about this article?
I don't think so. I think we've covered a lot of things in this first episode, which turned out to be a bit messy, but yeah. But as we said, like we try to keep it as we try to keep it casual and spontaneous.
Yeah,
And
also
yeah,
it's the first one, so it's important for us to go into depth about some of these things, so we kind of state our intentions with them, right, and where we
yeah,
are.
exactly.
Yeah, I would say though, at the end of this article where it says, not everyone has the time to do all of these things, but please don't do nothing. All I want to say is, yeah, sure. I mean, if you're listening to this and you've always wanted to get involved in vegan activism or activism for anything you believe is worthy, I mean, by all means, get involved if it's something good, right? Not if it's something bad. But if it's like for veganism, do get involved, because even if you don't change anybody's mind, at least you'll spend time with other vegans, and that can be so rewarding in itself. Just to be with people
Mhm.
who believe in the same ethical things you believe in. You'll just feel good. Right? Even if you don't achieve anything, you don't change anybody's mind, you'll just feel good about it. You'll just feel good about spending time with other human beings who generally believe in the same things you believe in. That's just it will just make you happier.
Yeah. Yeah, also, I think I can confirm this, like a lot of positive energy from people who are aware of the suffering and injustice. I mean, this is
Yeah.
something very
I'm
valuable, I think.
in September, during September and October, it's calving season for fox hunting. So I wake up at like 4 a.m. On a Saturday. Yeah, I have a day job, by the way. So I wake up on a Saturday at 4 a.m. I get dressed, give the dog some food. I go out. I go into a cramped 4x4. It's very cold in the UK. Yeah, at 4 a.m. on like October, and I go out in the countryside into the mud. Sometimes it's raining. It will be miserable, an absolutely miserable experience. I'll be chasing people on horses. Yeah, and I'm not on a horse through the mud. All my body aches. It's cold. I want to be back in my bed. And then I'll come home, have a shower, and I'll feel fantastic. Yeah. And I'll feel fantastic because I'm doing something I believe in with other people who believe the same thing I believe in. Right. So I would say when Carnism Debunked says, don't do nothing as a vegan. Yeah. I mean, do go out and do all of these things he mentions. Do the thing that fits you, right? What
Mhm.
fits your personality and your talents and the things you're capable of doing and are comfortable with doing, right? There's no point if you're afraid of confrontation, doing street outreach, because people will shout at you. So if you can't handle being shouted at, if that's gonna, maybe trigger some PTSD or trauma or give you like a terrible time, don't do it, right? But do the other things, right? Find the thing that suits you, your talents and where you are as a
Or
person.
if
So
nothing
I would
else,
agree.
just be a good and happy and healthy example of your philosophy.
Yes. Yes, you can be like completely egotistical and just go, I'm just gonna work out and take care of myself. I'm gonna look my best. And that's like, and then if somebody asks, what do you do to look so good? You say, I'm a vegan, even though it might
Yeah.
not be true. Yeah. Even though it might not be actually the veganism that makes you look good. It doesn't matter. Just say you're a vegan and that's why you look good.
Or say you're an antinatalist. Maybe that works.
Yes. Why are you happy all the time? Oh, because I've subscribed to this philosophy that says life is suffering. Okay.
No, but seriously, I'm not joking. I think finding out about antinatalism and reading through the literature and seeing that there's actually a complex and well-argued philosophy behind it, I think it gives many people also some kind of relief and makes them feel understood and say, okay, it's
Yeah.
just not just my depressed mind that came up with it, but there's actually some
Yeah, I
weight to
discovered
it.
Schopenhauer by accident at 16 or 15 or something like that.
Yeah, I
And it
remember.
was like, yeah, and I read it and I was like, oh, I wasn't the first person in the world to have these thoughts. And that was great. Just discovering that I felt understood. Finally, somebody understood me. Even if it was this man who I would probably in real life would never be friends with. Let's be honest.
Yeah, but who would, honestly?
Yes, that's true. maybe we'd both be walking our dogs and then we'd have like a very casual chat. But I think that's the limits of it. Yeah. So anyway, thanks for listening to our first
Yeah.
podcast.
Also,
This sort of thing doesn't need money. What it needs is people engaging with it. So
yeah, please feel free to share feedback, share your opinions, post comments, and yeah, also make if you want, you can make some suggestions. We've got a lot to cover already, of course, but we are always happy to receive suggestions.
Absolutely. Well, that's all from us. Goodbye, and see you next time.
Take care.